Do you remember as a kid when you would go down a hill on a bike or on a sled or anything like that, and it felt so exhilarating, it felt so thrilling, and then you had to walk back up and you were out of breath, and it was so much fun to then go back down again. But then time passes, you go away to college, you go to school, you get older, whatever the case may be, but then you go back to that very same hill, and it's underwhelming. It's not that there wasn't a hill there, it's just that it wasn't as steep as you thought, and it probably wasn't as thrilling as you thought. That's kind of like my experience with the recent Toys R Us visit that I just had. Well, I suppose two recent Toys R Us visits that I've had. Let me get a couple things straight before we start the whole video here. By no means am I a retail expert. I wouldn't know the first thing about setting up a retail store, let alone running it, especially in a difficult market like now where everything online is so much easier, cheaper, and, well, kind of faster at this point. Another thing that I want to say real quick is that I went to the Mall of America when it was kind of off-peak hours. It was after holiday break for a lot of schools, so there wasn't a whole lot of people there, as well as we were just right after the holidays and people are just kind of resettling back into their normal routine. So I don't think this is indicative of like traffic levels or anything like that of what I'm about to say. And the other thing you need to know before we kind of get into the rest of the video here is that I really wasn't expecting to make this video. It just kind of all of a sudden happened at once when I was in the car driving, thinking like, wow, okay, that was just like an okay experience. So with the impromptu-ness of the video, as well as some of my background not in retail, let's get into it. The very first Toys R Us experience, and that is the one inside Macy's. Macy's across the United States have a department within the store, a department store, that is dedicated to toys and branded specifically Toys R Us. And in theory, it's a good idea because as a child, I remember going to department stores and there would be a dedicated toy department. It wouldn't be as full or have as many options as a KB Toys, as a Toys R Us, for instance, but it would have like enough interesting things to look at that you'd beg your parents to go and check it out. Now that a toy department is back in these department stores in the form of Toys R Us, it's kind of the same experience, only I would say it's a little more jam-packed. There's not a lot of browsing the toy aisles as much as it is cramming between people so that you can kind of see these very skinny aisles and what's on them. And as for the stuff that I'm looking for, things like Marvel Legends, 6-inch scale action figures, G.I. Joe, Nerf, all that kind of stuff, there's an okay selection. I wouldn't say, again, it's great or anything like that, but you're in a bigger store and you're kind of realizing that the experience isn't going to be as great as if you were in a dedicated store just for toys. It's a great idea, it's just not for me. There's just not enough selection for the things that I'm into, and again, I have no problems with that stuff, but when I heard that there were flagship stores for Toys R Us, dedicated stores just for everything toy related, that's when kind of things changed and I got a little excited. So the very first one was opened in the American Dream Mall, I think out in New Jersey, if I'm not mistaken. And then the second one, of course, was announced in the Mall of America in Minnesota. And I was headed up to Minnesota, I was headed to the Mall of America, so I had to check it out. And originally, I wanted to make this funny TikTok about how I was trying to hunt for a Toys R Us, and when I got there, it would be very exciting. Luckily, it was close by the Nickelodeon universe, the Lego store, Build-A-Bear. Like, it was near a lot of other toy-related things, so it kind of made sense of where it was situated on the first floor. But then when I got there, I realized that it was already a toy store that I have been to in the past. The first thing that I was kind of questioning was like, is it the same toy store, but they just got like a Toys R Us rebranding on it with like Toys R Us stuff all over the walls? It didn't seem like a whole lot had changed. So knowing that was already a toy store was kind of curious. Like, it wasn't built out in any specific way to make it more interactive. There wasn't like a whole lot of stuff jumping out at you to like say, try me. Of course there was like a few things, but it was all geared for like little tykes, little toddlers. Like, well, where's all the stuff to try? Because I remember in Toys R Us of old, there were stations for trying video games, there were stations for trying like different stuff. Having the Toys R Us store replace an existing toy store just kind of made sense, and it really wasn't anything exactly special that would make it seem any different than what I had experienced like a year and a half prior. So as I was walking around, there were Funko Pops, there were more action figure stuff that I would be looking for. Of course, I found the Nerf selection that, again, had a bigger selection, and when something was there, the prices were a little more expensive. Now, granted, it was at the Mall of America, so you're expected to pay a little premium. I can't imagine rent being cheap at one of the largest malls in America, but it was significantly more, and if you are on Amazon, you know they have frequent deals and stuff like that, and to Toys R Us's credit, there were a ton of deals on things like puzzles and board games and stuff like that. After the holidays, I'm sure they had a lot of extra stock around, but it was highly specific to those areas. And from what I could tell, there weren't any clearance areas, which was a huge bummer because those are the aisles where I thrive and find just kind of some random weird stuff that I like to kind of bargain hunt, treasure hunt, whatever you want to call it. And really, like, ultimately it boils down to just the feeling of overall a meh, or, oh, okay, like, this is just a store with toys in it. And as I was watching people come in and out of the store, it really necessarily wasn't kids, it was parents dragging their kids in and getting pictures next to Jeffrey. So having that picture with Jeffrey was actually more for the parents than it was for the kids, because the kids weren't really interested in any of the toys. And the stuff that was branded Toys R Us, so like the Jeffreys and like all the photo ops, were really well done. They were high quality and they looked really good. But some of the other stuff, there was like a big Funko box that you could take a picture of yourself in. It was kind of beat up, and to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if that was from the previous toy store that occupied the exact same space as this Toys R Us is in. But yeah, I was underwhelmed. It was like, again, coming back expecting some kind of rush of nostalgia and just not really getting it. But here's what I would have done as somebody who's an expert of some sorts with toys, as well as toy experiences and toy influencing, I guess, content creation, whatever you want to call it. The first thing I would have done is create more photo ops, because there were some of them there, but I don't think nearly enough. The second thing I would have done is have more stations where you could try out toys, where there would be demos of toys, and just, I think the term for it now is like, what, activations, marketing activations, where you would have a stand for gel blasters, where you would have like a display of Nerf darts and the Nerf products that are coming out, have some of those Lego dioramas that could literally just come from the Lego Center near the Mall of America's Nickelodeon universe. Have a slime lab where you could play and manipulate with some of those really gross compounds. And what I think I'm really trying to get at is, like, not try to replicate what going through your phone and looking on Amazon would do, but replicating an experience that you can't get online. To do that, you would need to have customers. And if you had customers, you'd get business, and if you get business, then you get employees, and you'd have employees to do those activations, and it all kind of repeats in that circle. So where do you kind of break that chicken and the egg thing? That's where I have no experience. But I can guarantee that if you had elements out that people could play with, even if you just had like a card table where people could trade and play Pokemon cards, like, that would have been an extremely cool feature that you just can't get going to a Target, going to a Walmart, browsing on Amazon. And the last thing that I would have done is maybe figure out a better target market. Because of what I saw, it was the parents dragging the kids into the store, so have more nostalgia-fueled things. The photo ops are a great start, of course, but there could have been some other nods to Toys R Us of history. Because the strange thing was that at the Mall of America location, there were no video games there. Not a single one. There were no stations where you'd have to crane your neck up and then afterwards, like, you'd have neck pain for the next 3 days. Having old or vintage or nostalgic toys as a quasi-museum behind some plexiglass would have been a really cool feature. That would have fueled nostalgia. That would have been like, oh, I had that as a kid. Oh, I wanted that as a kid. Or have a TV playing some of the great moments of Toys R Us. I don't think there's a Generation X or a millennial person that doesn't remember the sweepstakes where you could run through a Toys R Us as fast as humanly possible and throw as much things as you could in the cart before the time ran out. Having a recap of those events and just playing them on a loop would have been a lot of fun to just relive a memory. And when you spend more time in a place, you're likely going to spend more money. As it stands right now, the Toys R Us in Mall of America is just a place to browse through rather quickly, grab a souvenir just to say that you had shopped at a Toys R Us after they had all closed down, and then leave. Those are my thoughts on things, so if you've been to one of the standalone Toys R Us's, let me know, because maybe the one out in New Jersey is vastly different than the one in the Mall of America that I had experienced. And if you like talking about toys, the direction of the toy industry, Nerf, action figures, and just cool things, please consider subscribing to this channel, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.